Hello, welcome back to Animated Literacy. This is lesson number 56 from the Story Song and Action Book. In this lesson, we're going to be introducing Chauncy Chipmunk's story and his song and his sound and his gesture. Before we go into Chauncy Chipmunk, though, we're doing a little bit of review from our last lesson. Our last lesson, we introduced Ichabod Ichthyosaurus, and we drew pictures that use Ichabod's sound and his letter I. So here were some of the pictures that we drew. So after the lesson, I went back and I drew those pictures again, and then I labeled them and I added some adjectives to describe them. So here's a pig, and I labeled my pig as a fat pig. And we drew a picture of a blimp, and I called my blimp a round blimp. And here was a kid, and I called my kid a small kid. Then we drew a picture of a pick that we use for digging, and I called it a sharp pick. And I also added the word digs. So we're going to start putting more verbs, and verbs are words that name things you can do, and dig is one thing that you can do with a pick. Then we drew two different kinds of mitts. We drew a baseball mitt, and the mitt that I showed you is old, so I labeled this as an old mitt. And then we drew a mitt that you might use for taking a hot pan out of the stove, like an oven mitt, and I just labeled it a green mitt. Now there's a couple things on here that we didn't have time to draw yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to draw those today, and then you can try drawing them on your own after we finish the lesson. After we did our drawing, we did a song where we put in two words that rhyme. And so you put your name up here first. So let's say this was Sarah's page. Sarah could write Sarah here, and then she could write it here. And then we could sing it this way. Sarah, Sarah, what can you do? Skip to my loo, my darling. Now we can put pig. We put pig over here so Sarah can act like a pig. And what is something that a pig can do? And we talked about how pigs, if you put up a fence and you don't make it go way underground, they'll dig underneath it and get out. So pigs are really good at digging. And dig rhymes with pig. So we put, I can dig like a pig, skip to my loo, my darling. And then after we do our verse, we need to put a picture up here to show what the words mean. So here's a picture of a pig digging. And this pig, I called him a big fat pig. So we put in two words to describe him. And then he's digging in mud. So I wrote the word mud, and I was looking for some fun words to put with mud. So I put sticky mud, and gooey mud. So this is sticky, gooey mud. Then I wrote a little sentence up here to tell about my picture, and I wrote, my pig can dig. So I'm interested to look at your pages and see what you were doing. Well, one of the pictures that we didn't have time to draw was an insect. And here's a fun book about insects. This is called Insects Are My Life, because this little girl loves insects. And in fact, on the first page, her little brother goes out and collects a bunch of fireflies and puts them in a jar, and she goes and lets all the fireflies go, which doesn't make her little brother very happy, but she's very protective of those insects. So we're going to draw a picture of an insect. Now this is one that we've already drawn before, but we didn't label it an insect. We labeled it something else. So let's see if you can remember what we did here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw two circles for eyes. Then I'm going to put a pupil in each one. Then I'm going to come straight up from each eye and across. Then I'm going to give it some antennas, because insects have antennas. Then I'm going to come down and give it a dot for its nose and draw a line down to the dot from this eye, and straight back up. Now, one of the things that defines an insect is insects have three body parts. And the first body part here is the head, and that's for smelling and tasting and looking. The next body part is called the thorax. And the thorax of an insect is for its legs, and if it has wings, the wings also attach to the thorax. And all insects have 6 legs. Its third body part is called the abdomen. And that's where it processes its food. So what did we call this the first time we drew it? First time we drew it, we called it an ant. What was the first sound in ant? A. A for adding. What was the next sound? N. N for nibbling. And what was the next sound? T. T for tickling. This time we're going to call it an insect. What's the first sound in insect? I. I for itching. What's the next sound? N. In. And that's a word. In. What's the next sound in insect? S. S for surfing. What's the next sound? Se. E for exercise. The next sound? K. C for catching. And T for tickling. So there's an insect. Now a word that we didn't draw that's very easy and fun to draw is a pin. Now I got a pin here, but it's a little bit hard to see because it's really small. So this is a safety pin. And we're going to draw a picture of a safety pin. And it's kind of easy to draw. First thing I need to do is just make a circle. Then I just make 2 lines going out a little bit from the circle. And then I come from this line all the way up over the top. Then I just go straight down. And I come back up and a little bit past so it looks like it's open, and then put a line here at the bottom. So there's a picture of a safety pin. Say the word pin. What do you hear first? P. P for painting. What do you hear next? I. And what do you hear last? N. And so pin has the word in it, just like in insect. Now we drew something else yesterday that has something in it that rhymes with pin, but we didn't label the part that rhymes with pin. So today we're going to label it. We drew a picture of a blimp. So I'm going to make 2 dots on my page, make a curve going down, so now it looks like a happy face. Then I'm going to make another curve going up and come back up inside with a couple of curves. So there's the balloon part of a blimp so that it can fly up there in the sky. But people don't ride in the balloon. Where do they ride in a blimp? They ride in a little compartment down underneath. Now a balloon is very hard to control. It just goes wherever the wind takes it. But a blimp has a little motor and it has a propeller, and as the propeller goes around, it makes the blimp go forward. Now, if this blimp were just left like that, it could tip all over the place. So a blimp has fins. And here's a fin. And here's a fin. And the fins keep it from tipping over. A shark has a fin that keeps it from tipping over also. And Ichabod has a fin sticking up so that he can go straight in the water and go very fast and not tip over. So let's label the fin. What do you hear first? F for fishing. What do you hear next? I for itching. And what do you hear last? N. N for nibbling. And fin rhymes with pin because they both end with what? In. So now we do a lot of rhyming. So let me talk a little bit about why rhyming is so important and why we do so much rhyming. For one thing, it's fun. People like rhymes, and so songs have lots of rhymes in them, poems have lots of rhyme in them, and it turns out the brain likes rhymes. It remembers things if they're in a rhyme. So that's why we can remember Mother Goose rhymes for so long, and we can remember songs quite easily in many cases because of the rhyming in them. But also, rhyming makes it easy to figure out words. So here, we did pin and we did fin. And those 2 words rhymed because they both end with in. Now, if I just memorized those 2 words and I didn't look at the parts of those words, and I wanted to learn other words, I would have to memorize every single word. And you can see how many words are on this page that I would have to memorize. But it turns out when they study good readers, and they compare them to people who are having a difficult time with reading, that the good readers, in most cases, also are good at rhyming. And the people who are having a hard time reading are not good at rhyming. So rhyming is important when we read. And here's one of the reasons why. If I can read pin and I can read in, and I can see the rhyme part of the word, then all I have to do to read all these other words is change the consonant at the front. Because then I can read grin, shin, spin, tin, win, thin, chin, skin, twin, din, and in. And so good readers are very good at finding rhymes in words, changing the consonants into the front of the word in order to figure out what words that they've never seen before are. So that's another reason why we do a lot of rhyming in animated literacy. For Chauncy Chipmunk today, our first topic is going to be chipmunks. And here's a couple pictures of chipmunks. And you can see this one has big puffy cheeks. The chipmunk's cheeks can really stretch, and they can carry a lot of food in their cheeks. Now, chipmunk is related to a woodchuck. So they're in the same family, and they have many of the same habits. They both live in burrows down under the ground. But a chipmunk is a lot smaller than a woodchuck. A woodchuck usually weighs about 8 to 10 pounds, but a chipmunk only weighs 1 to 5 ounces. So that means it could take as many as 30 chipmunks, or even more, to weigh as much as a single woodchuck. So they're an awful lot smaller. This is a book I really like about chipmunks, and it's called Chipmunk Song, because a lot of people say that chipmunks like to sing. So I'm going to play you a recording of some chipmunk songs. So this is what chipmunks sound like. A lot of people confuse chipmunk sounds with bird sounds. They think they're listening to birds, when in fact, they're often listening to chipmunks. Another topic that we're going to be talking about today are some foods a chipmunk might like to eat, and these are foods Chauncy likes. Here's some cheddar cheese, here's some chocolate chips, here's some chestnuts, and here's some cherries. We're also going to be talking about a churn, and this is an old-fashioned butter churn. This is the way they used to make butter. They would go out and they would milk the cow, and then they would let the milk sit for a while. And the cream, that's the fat in the milk, doesn't weigh as much as the milk. So the cream would rise up and float on the top. And then they could skim the cream off the top. They would put it into the butter churn, and then they would take this stick that has a little plate at the bottom, and they'd pump it up and down like this. And they'd have to keep doing that for anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half, or even longer, before it would finally turn into butter. So it took a long time, and it took a lot of work to make butter. Another topic we're going to be talking about are parks. And this is a Skybrary book that's called The Park, and it talks about parks that you might have in your neighborhood. And this is a different kind of park, and it's called Bark Park. Who would go to a bark park? Dogs would go to a bark park to play with other dogs and to bark a lot. And here I have a copy of that Skybrary book called Bark Park, and I really like the story in this one. It starts out like this. It reads, strolling, rolling, having fun. And here's the dog strolling and rolling and having fun. Small dog, tall dog, down the street, dashing, splashing, old friends meet. So it talks about friends, and it has rhyming in it, and it has a lot of adjectives and a lot of verbs in it. So that's another thing I like about it. Hot dog, dot dog, in the park. Fat dog, rat dog, bark, bark, bark. And because it has so many adjectives and so many verbs in it, I can make a chart of all the adjectives from that book. And so all of these adjectives are included. And I can make a chart of all the verbs in that book. And then after I've drawn my picture and I go to labeling it, I can use words from here to describe my picture. And I can use words from here to name how my picture and the parts of my picture can move and things that they can do. So that's one of the reasons I really like that book. And I told you our story is going to be about friendship. So this is a book about making friends. And our story is also about parties. And so this is a book about where's the party. And one last thing, our book is going to be about food you might have at a party. And this is a Skybrary book called Rainbow Stew. And stew is kind of like soup. This is a book called Stone Soup that talks about making soup with a stone. How do you think you could do that? You'd have to read this book to find out. The difference between soup and stew is a lot thicker and it has a lot bigger chunks in it. Then there's something that's kind of between soup and stew that's called chowder. And you might have had clam chowder or corn chowder or something like that. So now we're going to learn the story for Chauncy Chipmunk. So here's my Chauncy Chipmunk. And Chauncy Chipmunk lives in Cherry Tree Park. And when the children come to visit Cherry Tree Park, they love feeding Chauncy. And he's choosy about the food that he is going to eat from the children that bring him food. So he likes cheddar cheese, so they bring him chunks of cheddar cheese, and he stuffs those into his cheeks. He likes cherries, so here's some cherries, and Chauncy will stuff those into his cheeks. He likes chestnuts, so he stuffs those in his cheeks. And he loves chocolate chips, so he stuffs those in his cheeks. Then he takes them back to his burrow and he stores them so that when he's hungry he can go to his burrow and eat them. So Chauncy's very popular with the chipmunks, with the children that come to Cherry Tree Park. But it turns out he's not very popular with the other chipmunks because all the children give Chauncy the food they bring. They don't give it to the other chipmunks. So here's a picture of Chauncy getting food from the children who come to Cherry Tree Park. But here's a picture of the other chipmunks, and you can see now Chauncy's not very happy. He's back here with a frown on his face because the other chipmunks won't let him join in their chirp-along, sing-along, and they won't let him join in when they're playing Chase the Chipmunks up and down the trees. So Chauncy wishes he were as popular with the other chipmunks as he is with the children of Cherry Tree Park. So Chauncy figured out a plan of how to get the other chipmunks to like him. He found an old axe, and he took the axe and he started chopping the cherries, chestnuts, cheddar cheese, and chocolate chips up into little tiny chunks. Then after he had chopped them all up, Chauncy went to an old butter churn and he put all the pieces inside the butter churn. Then he set the butter churn out in the sun so that all those things could melt together to form kind of a sticky, gooey chowder. Then after it melted, he pushed it into the cold stream that went through Cherry Tree Park so that it could chill and turn into Chauncy Chipmunk's chewy, cheesy chocolate chowder. When the chowder was all ready, Chauncy Chipmunk took out a dinner bell and rang the bell, and when the other chipmunks heard the chime of the bell, they came running over to see what was happening, and as soon as they saw the chowder, they began chowing down on Chauncy Chipmunk's chewy chocolate cheesy chowder. And now Chauncy is as popular with the other chipmunks as he is with the children who come to Cherry Tree Park, because each time he gets enough food, he makes a new batch of Chauncy Chipmunk's chewy cheesy chocolate chowder. So whenever you see our picture of Chauncy Chipmunk, or you see his two letters together, CH, think about how Chauncy Chipmunk chopped up those chunks of cheddar cheese and chestnuts and chocolate chips and cherries, and take out an axe, pretend to hold it in both hands like this, come across your center line of your body, and go ch for chopping. Now if we put Chauncy Chipmunk into our songs. We've been making charts to go along with the things that you can put into Are You Sleeping? So here was my first chart, and now I've got a whole second chart. So let's see what Chauncey would say, how Chauncey would say these words. If Chauncey has a bat, and the bat goes screech, what's Chauncey's bat going to say? Cheech. And if Chauncey had a bat, and the bat's going boing, 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 Chauncy Chipmunk's bat's going to do what? Choing, choing, choing. And if his frog is going ribbit, 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 what's Chauncey's frog going to do? Chibbit, chibbit, chibbit. And if his cat's going meow, what's Chauncey's cat going to say? Cheow. And if his duck's going quack, what's Chauncey's duck going to say? Chack. So we can do a lot of playing with Chauncey's sound. Or if we put it into the song that we did with blowing big bubbles of bubble gum, sing that with me. Blowing big bubbles with bubble gum, blowing big bubbles with bubble gum. How would Chauncey sing that? Chowing chig chubbles with chubble chum, chowing chig chubbles with chubble chum. Now here's Chauncey's song. So warm up your muscles again and do the motions with me and say the words after me. Chauncy Chipmunk chops up chunks of cheddar cheese. Chop, chop. Chauncy Chipmunk chops up chunks of cheddar cheese. Chop, chop. Now rub your tummy because it tastes good. To make cheesy chocolate chowder for his chums. Chop, chop. To make cheesy chocolate chowder for his chums. Chop, chop. Now how are we gonna make Chauncey CH? Because he needs 2 letters for his sound. How would you make a C? Make a C like this. And how can you make an H? I can put a line up like this, and then I can put a hump on my line like this for an H. So we can go C, H, C, H, C, H. So let's do that in the song. Ready? CH is for Chauncey's chowder. CH is for Chauncey's chowder. Now show me how he chews it. Chewy, chewy. Chewy, cheesy chocolate chowder. Chewy, cheesy chocolate chowder. Chauncy Chipmunk chews the chowder with his chums. Chauncy Chipmunk chews the chowder with his chums. Chop, chop. Now let's try that along with our tape recording and see if you can join in on the words and do the motions. And if you can't remember all the words, you can do the motions while the tape is singing them. Ready?
Chauncy Chipmunk chops up chunks of cheddar cheese. Chop, chop, to make cheesy chocolate chowder for his chums. Chop, chop, CH is for Chauncey's chowder. Chewy, cheesy chocolate chowder. Chauncy Chipmunk chews the chowder with his chums. Chop, chop.
So what's Chauncy Chipmunk's sound? Ch. So now when you get your paper for Chauncy Chipmunk, you can turn your page first to the front, do your rainbow writing over Chauncy Chipmunk's letters, then turn your page on the back, and draw some pictures and write about things from your life that are kind of like Chauncey's. Chauncey's story took place in a park. If you've ever been to a park, you could draw me a picture of the park. You could draw who you saw in the park. Did you see animals? Did you see people? What did you do in the park? Chauncey had worked at making friends in his story. If you want to make a friend, what are some things that you could do to make a friend? So you could draw me a picture, write a story about that. Chauncy Chipmunk liked to make special food, and he made his chewy, cheesy chocolate chowder. Do you ever prepare food by putting different ingredients together? So you could tell me about making food. So I hope you enjoyed our story today about Chauncy Chipmunk. And in our next lesson, we're going to be drawing some things that have Chauncy Chipmunk sounds, so we can learn some new words and learn how to use Chauncy in those words. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.